Welcome, Kevin Downey Jr. from your bunker there. It looks like you're in a patriotic bunker.
You know what? It's very patriotic here. I have it's very mid-century modern. Sort
Yeah.
of looks like I bought all the furniture from George Jetson's garage sale. And Trumpy Bear is actually he's covering up an album that you might not want seen because of some nudity.
Oh,
So
really?
the Trumpy Bear's flag is covering. Yeah.
And what album is it that has a lot of them in the 70s had nudity
Oh,
on them?
This one is Kubanga, the torrid Latin dances.
Oh,
So you can imagine what that looks like.
yes.
You can
Oh,
just
that's great.
imagine.
Yeah, I remember there were certain albums that I couldn't have in my home. I couldn't even have Meatloaf when I was a kid. Meatloaf, because it was Bat Out of Hell. It just seemed like it was advocating,
Oh,
going to hell anyway. And
yeah.
and so I actually had, for a short time, I bought the Meatloaf album from my friend. I had it in my closet, and my dad found it, and then he sat me down and he quizzed me on why I would be endorsing Meatloaf, and he actually read the lyrics. He read the lyrics, which were in the inside cover. And we painfully went over Paradise by the Dashboard Light together. It was terrible.
Oh, that must have been a long, hard talk. That was a brutal.
Yeah. So years later, I always had this story, and then I met Meatloaf through Gutfeld, because Meatloaf was a watcher of Gutfeld. And when Greg and I did a show together, Meatloaf came, and then we were hanging out in the hotel afterward. And I told Meatloaf that story, and he was so funny the way he reacted, because my dad has already, passed on. And so I just thought Meatloaf would laugh, but he resisted. He said, "Listen, I heard so much of that nonsense." And he says, "If you look at that album cover, I'm coming out of hell. I'm like a bat out of hell. It's a redemptive story." And he's defending all of the albums. And then even the lyrics to Paradise by the Dashboard Light, he talks about the moral implications of the sexual encounter he had, and how he was committed to the woman for life because he had made a promise. And so he was, I couldn't stop him from defending, his entire canon for my dad.
Yeah. You think he just laugh and go, "Hey, that's great. Let's get a beer."
Yeah. Yeah. But he was passionate, but he was great. Great guy to spend time with. And as is everybody, that anyone I meet through, whatever celebrities you happen to meet that watch Fox News, you end up meeting them, and they're very interesting people, because they're well known, and they were in the celebrity world, and yet they are unabashed in that they watch Fox News, or at least they watch Gutfeld. And so you end up meeting very interesting people.
Nice.
Where are you?
Very cool.
Where do you live?
I'm in I spend half my time in Long Island and half in Michigan.
Yeah,
and right now I'm in Long Island, on Long Island.
Where in Michigan did you grow up?
I grew up in Detroit, and then we ran off to the suburbs in 1977. I was like 11 years old. Too much violence. We'd had enough violence.
Yeah.
And we decided it was time to go.
And you were like in the city of Detroit as a kid?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just out there. I was out there Friday and Saturday at the Detroit House of Comedy, which is right across from Tiger Stadium.
Oh, okay. That's a new place. That place is kind of new.
It's new.
How was it? Did you have fun?
Well, it was.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to be able to ask you about this, because I got the consensus essentially, because the crowds were kind of light. I had like 85 people at my Saturday night show, and of course I wanted to have a sellout. I had just had some sold out shows in St. Louis, and so I was looking to do something similar. But everybody who came said, "You dummy, don't come here. Don't come to Detroit on a holiday weekend. Everybody leaves." And is that the case, that people just flee to the north or something in Michigan?
Absolutely. So Michigan is a lot like Long Island in that it's surrounded by water, except Long Island is an island. Michigan is a peninsula. And everyone goes up north, as we say. In New York, we say upstate. In Michigan, we go up north.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone has a boat. And if you don't have a boat, you're at the beach because there's so much shoreline. There's just so much water and so much to do. But everyone goes up north. So many people have cabins. If you don't have a cabin, you can rent one and you go fishing. It's a little early to swim up north, a little too early. It's going to be cold. But yeah, everyone goes up north on a holiday weekend.
Yeah. So, that's probably why I got that. The booking was not long standing in that it came in just like, 8 weeks ago or something. So I should have known,
Right.
I think these are the kind of things that I have to plan better. But I'm sure that the comedy club was like, hey, we have this date wide open because nobody wants it. Right.
No one wants it. Normally, so I worked locally on Long Island for the holiday weekend because no one wants to fly someone in and put them up and pay for all that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why.
So you
also,
do a lot of
downtown scary.
And so when you came to New York, did you live out in Long Island, or did you like live in Queens? What was your initial I always assume I start these podcasts and I don't even do adequate introductions, but for people who are familiar with you, I mean, you did Red Eye. We used to do stand-up together. Kevin Downey Jr. is a stand-up and a writer for PJ Media, right?
Yes.
And so
and
some people. Yeah, what's your podcast?
Oh, I've got a radio show on Long Island, 103.9 FM out in Suffolk. It's LI News Radio, Monday through Friday, 10 to 11 a.m., where we clown slap the commies every weekday.
That is great. I forgot. And how dare I call your legit radio show a podcast? I'm just used to saying that word, but I knew that you were in the legit world of radio.
It happens every day, my friend, every day.
It's funny because it is, it's almost like print media in that, to me, it's still, when you see something in a, an online magazine, like somebody does a profile of a comedian in, some whatever it is. And it's like, oh, well, that's the online version of Rolling Stone or Time or whatever it is, so it still has, even though those publications get way more viewers than the print version.
Yeah.
But there's still a weird, if someone gets their album reviewed in the actual paper version of the publication, you're like, oh, wow, you're kind of more impressed,
Absolutely. Yep. I know exactly what you mean. And I don't know why. I would much rather be in the online version because no one's buying magazines anymore. But there's some, I don't know, some respect or mad props, mad bomb shouts to that guy or something. But you're right. It doesn't make sense. Oh, we both, I'm not saying anything. We both know people who have done Letterman, but when he was on vacation and Whoopi Goldberg was sitting in or something like that.
Yes.
And they have always felt like I got robbed.
Yeah, exactly. You never have but you did the Late Show. So that's your credit and you're going to use that.
Yeah.
But psychologically, you have this thing of like, I knew a guy named Jim Murtaugh, who's you probably have come across him. Great actor, and everybody knows him. Everybody knows his face. He's been in tons of TV and movie, but he did stand up for a while in the 70s, and he did stand up when Cosby was filling in for Johnny Carson. And he always used to mention that, like, oh, I never got to meet Johnny, so because that even, back in those days, that was the thing you wanted to do, was sit next to Johnny. But I said, you still did the Tonight Show. So, exactly. So I would think some of the people that watch my show and my people on Locals, they might recognize you because you did Red Eye, although you did it a few times, right?
Yeah, I think like probably 3 times.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time walking out with Lou Dobbs, just laughing, going, this is hilarious.
Yeah.
I am nowhere near this man's level. I'm just a knucklehead comedian from Michigan who moved to New York, and I'm walking out onto a soundstage on your show with Lou Dobbs. I start laughing, and he turns around and looks at me and goes, what's so funny? I go, you're Lou Dobbs.
Yeah.
he started howling.
It's incredible. And those days were amazing because, when I look back on the panels that we had, it was always like that. Like, sometimes there were, celebs like, like your kind of Kevin Sorbo type of guy. But other times you had, legit Washington people like KT McFarland who, worked in national security, sitting next to someone like yourself, or Tom Cotter
Yeah.
or something like that. And so it's always fun to look at the panels that we had of
Yeah.
odd,
It was
odd
great.
bedfellows.
It was hilarious.
I went on before we got on. I went to your Twitter feed and I noticed you had a Truth Social link, and I was like, oh, I wonder if Kevin is like majorly on Truth Social. But I went there, and it's your Truth Social is kind of like mine. Like I created a Truth Social, and I never got any traction on there. It's Deadsville over there. Some people have
Yeah.
really good luck with it, but I mean, you're in the legit right wing media world, and do you have the same experience that I do with True Social?
Absolutely. It took me, I started following people, and I realized I am following way more than am being followed. It took almost, I would say, a year and a half before that even evened out. And I think I'm at 30 each right now, maybe 40. I don't know. Just I
Yeah.
get no action there whatsoever. I've also noticed when Trump says something, if you look at all the comments, it's just memes. It's just
Yeah.
like Trump 24 meme. No one's opining or saying anything. So yeah. I mean, I don't even post all of my articles there. I try to, but if I'm in a hurry, like
Yeah.
what am I going to pick up? 4 readers? What's the matter? Yeah, I'm shocked that he's getting so much money for that. But I mean, good on him. He needs it. Obviously, the Marxists are dragging him through the courts, so
Yeah.
he needs the dough.
Yeah. It is amazing. I mean, and I think we can say that it's not as if we, have to be ultra partisan all the time. When you see something that's plain as day, you can kind of call it out. And I think Truth Social I mean, is massively overvalued. But hey, if he's going to cash in on it, that's fine.
Yeah.
So why don't we talk about your kind of political journey? Because you grew up in, in Michigan. You came to New York as a stand-up comic. I think we used to run into each other at, New York Comedy Club or some of these other
Yeah.
venues. And we didn't know each other's politics because we were just basically trying to break into the stand-up world. But
Right.
I was always kind of, your garden variety conservative, but I didn't have to think about it much because in those days you were just so busy running around trying to make a career. But then, it later came out. And then once I was on Fox News, I kind of came out of the closet and I was basically like, all right, here we go. I'm the right wing comic. Right. So what was your journey like?
So my parents were both auto workers. They both worked in an auto factory. My dad for much longer than my mom. So, and my first election was Reagan's second election. I believe he was going against, was it Dukakis? Did Reagan run against Dukakis?
Dukakis was George W. Bush. Reagan was Mondale, right?
Yes.
Because he ran against Carter in 1980, and then he did Mondale in 84.
Yes. All right. Thank you. So this is my first election. I'm 18 years old. I have no idea who to vote for. And my friend goes, are you kidding me? You're the son of 2 auto workers. You were born to be a Democrat. Yeah. I just went, okay. And I became a Democrat. And I stayed. I was in New York City. I moved to Manhattan. My first New York City apartment was in Manhattan in 1986. Crappy little apartment with a bathroom in the hallway. And I just became a New York City liberal. And I stayed one until, all right, I probably shouldn't say his name, but I'll tell you later. Let's just say we'll call him a true son of liberty who used to book a comedy club on Long Island, if that's a hint.
Yes.
And okay, there you go. So he has a 3-hour conversation with me where he wisely and kindly points out that I'm a doofus. I have no idea what I'm talking about, and I'm too smart to be a liberal. So I spend a year reading Fox, CNN, and BBC every day. And I realized I have no idea. He's right. I have no idea what I'm talking about. So George Bush's reelection against John Kerry, the guy who looks like a talking tree from The Wizard of Oz, is my first time voting for a Republican. And now I'm traveling and I'm doing comedy. And I talk to audiences and you can get the vibe. And I said, he's going to win. And now keep in mind, at this point, I'm living in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, surrounded by diehard libs. And all my friends are just not even liberal. They're already progressive. And you're so stupid. He's not going to win. But traveling around and just asking audiences around the country, I got the vibe, and that's the first time I voted for a Republican, and I haven't gone back. I have voted Republican, Libertarian for smaller races, because I went through a little Libertarian phase, but that party is dead. It's pointless now. I mean, I like the way they think. You leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. I was always like, all right, well, that's pretty cool. I can go on that. But yeah, I have not voted for even. I mean, I even pinched my nose and voted for Romney. He wasn't my first choice or my 10th, but he was the choice that was put forward. So yeah, and then Trump came out, and I became Mr. Out Loud and Proud for Trump on the social medias. And of course, New York City comedy every bit as well as I do. It made me kind of a pariah. I started losing work, etc., etc. And then I would say one of the very few is a good friend of mine, Steven Cruiser. He was Out Loud and Proud Republican, conservative, I should say, and never looked back. And I had seen him on the early days of Red Eye with Gutfeld. He was on there a lot. And I did a tour with him of some military bases in the Pacific. And then I just, I eventually just stopped being afraid of losing work. I didn't care. And he got me a job at PJ Media. So I've made way more money being, out loud and proud at what I believe in than by sheepishly not talking about it. And when I did come out, I did lose some gigs, but I more than made that up. And then with the radio show. So yeah, I don't.
Then you finally mine your audience. It's quite amazing that this is the way it's done. And I always tell people when I go to, I didn't have I actually had a really good weekend in Detroit, and those 80 people that were at the show were very, they were super happy. They were doing selfies after the show and everything. But I've been doing clubs, Dallas, Houston, St. Louis, that are totally packed. And it's because of the Gutfeld relationship. The audience is there. And I never had that when I did comedies. I did a Comedy Central half-hour special. Now, I tried to mine that and, maybe sold some tickets. I had, Conan O'Brien. My relationship with The Tonight Show was long-standing. I never had that kind of, any kind of juice from those traditional media operations. But Gutfeld has been huge. And it's basically just finding your audience. But I was always a slave to that. That's why I kind of kept it hidden. And it sounds like you kept it hidden as long as you could because you had to deal with people who booked, Comedy Central shows and Conan O'Brien and things like that, right?
Yep, absolutely. And now, if you look at who's getting on these late night shows now, I've seen people I've never heard of, and they'll come out, and I'm not kidding. This woman comes out and she goes, "So I'm a lesbian." Yeah. And that's the applause break.
Yeah.
That crowd's not going to dig me. So, yeah. Well, they're not going to book me to start with. But yeah, that's where the late night shows have gone.
It is interesting that I made a comment to a fellow comic. The identity of comics is now the material of comics. You had comedians who would, they had an identity, whether you are, we would work clubs and there'd be a black comic and there'd be a female comic and then there'd be like the white male. And you would maybe mention something to do with identity because it was always an easy way. Hey, I look like this, or I'm that kind of guy, yep. Or you'd play against whatever type you had or things like that. But if you watch these television stand-up appearances now, when you talk about like the late night, a late night stand-up set, the material is all identity based. Like there's not any jokes that have to do with what we used to talk about with comedy, which was universal ideas and things. Everything is, I'm this, like you said, she came out and said, she declared her identity and then she did jokes based on that identity, right? That's it's like identity is the setup and the punchline now for almost all of comedy.
Yep. And if you don't have the right identity, well, you don't get to go on that TV show, young man. Yeah. You straight white man. Yeah, absolutely. It's all identity now. And the sickest thing I've seen, and you can't even call it comedy. Colbert did this thing he called during the pandemic that he called the vaccine. And he had these hypodermic needles come out. Oh, yeah. And they would dance to tequila. Vaccine. It was just so. I mean, talk about be clowning yourself on TV. I was embarrassed for him, and ideologically, we're not on the same side at all. But I was humiliated for him that he would sink so low. But I think he had to. I think they're about to can him. And I think someone had a conversation with him and said, "Hey, if you go full on against Trump, you can keep your job. What do you want to do?" And I think, "Oh, okay, let's do it."
Well, yeah, I mean, I think when he got on CBS, I thought, okay, Steven is going to, because I mean, I worked at the Daily Show, and so I worked with Colbert when he was part of that whole team, and then he had the Colbert Report, right? And it was obviously the Colbert Report was a left-wing show that was poking fun of kind of Bill O'Reilly type of stuff, and it was very successful in that cable market. But then when he went to network, I thought, oh, what he's going to do now is go a little more to the center. That's what you do when you go network. It's almost like when you win the nomination, then you go to the center for the general election, right?
Right.
But he didn't. He made the opposite choice because, oddly, I think the smart choice, because in today's media world, you don't go to the center anymore. You're basically mining out whatever fraction of your audience. You kind of go for it. And he had a left-wing audience. He had Colbert's audience is probably the most, graduate school level audience in TV. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Like,
what?
Multiple degrees.
I think, I think the people who watch his show, they get their degrees, and they probably spent some time in a tent at Columbia University about 3 weeks ago. Yeah. I think that's who watches Colbert.
Yeah. So he went for it, and he was like, I'm going to go for that crowd. And oddly enough, in today's media world, that's enough to get you, in at least for some time, number one, like the highest ratings, because it's so fractured. But it is really interesting. I mean, it's all right. You disappeared for a second, but you're back.
So did you. I was like, oh no, what happened?
He's gone.
You know what? Here's what else I wonder. Are you familiar with Operation Mockingbird?
No.
Okay, Operation Mockingbird. In 1975, I think, the CIA got caught. They were sort of running a couple of media outlets, Washington Post, New York Times. They would threaten and or bribe people to put in the stories they wanted, and they were told, well, there was congressional hearings. You can't do that anymore. Okay, we won't do that anymore. But if you read the congressional hearings that came out of it, they actually, like on page 476, they say, well, Operation Mockingbird is still ongoing and will continue to ongo. And so I'm wondering if there wasn't political pressure from somewhere above that said, look, you can go against Trump, or you can get a day job. What do you want to do? I'm wondering if that is what happened too.
Yeah, a lot of it though is you don't even have to be a conspiracy theorist to see, because it's a very loose-knit conspiracy. You got, like you were talking about COVID, you've got the pharmaceutical companies, they're obviously pushing this kind of thing. You got national security, they're pushing their thing. You've got the Democrat Party, they're pushing the Russia thing, and that brings in the national security, because anything they can do to to poison Russia, or to be essentially to keep the Cold War alive, they will do. And if that means taking down Trump because they think he's not going to keep the Cold War alive, they will go in with the Democrats. So it's like they don't even have to have a meeting, and they don't have to have a mockingbird. They just all, they're able to create this kind of web of agreement without the conference call.
Right. Yep. That makes complete sense. And I think, what else I think? I think Joe Rogan said it. I think he's the one who said the surgical mask is the MAGA hat for the left. So you can even tell who is on your side just as they walked into the office, or if they walked into a Dunkin' Donuts. You could tell who was on your side.
Yeah.
And if you saw Colbert wearing a mask, then we know he's on our side. He has bent the knee and put on the mask, so to speak. The Fauci face diaper, which we know from the Cochrane report, offered, and I quote, little to no help.
Yeah.
But that was I still see people wearing them.
Oh yeah. I mean, where was I recently? Oh, I was in Detroit. So yeah, I was walking from my hotel to the club, and through downtown, because I was generally walking in the broad daylight, so I thought I felt safe enough, and it's basically through very touristy areas. So I'm walking straight through Detroit to the gig every day, and I saw I mean, it wasn't 10 or 20% like it was during the goofy times, but you would see about 2 to 5% of people walking around with masks on in the middle of the day.
And may I add, downtown is the hipster part of Detroit now.
Yeah,
because they're building it up. 10 years ago, there was nary a hipster. I knew of one. But now that it's a little safer, now the hipsters are moving in, and the prices are going way up again, of course.
Yeah.
And now there's a Whole Foods. Where anytime there's a Whole Foods, that means it's safe for hipsters. And there's a college down there full of hipsters, Wayne State. So yeah, you were probably pretty safe there. I mean, I wouldn't go out at 4 a.m., but
well, it was like most cities that I travel to now. You have homeless people and kind of sitting outside the churches, and then you've got hipsters living in kind of condos, and I like the hipster joints because I want to get a good cup of coffee. So I woke up, I went to Speaker Box because the owner of Speaker Box messaged me on Facebook and said, because I said I'm coming to Detroit, and the guy said, hey, come to my club, and he's got a kind of a hipster coffee shop. So I went there. And then I went to some place called Eggies or Eggs or something like that. It was like a kind of a hipster breakfast place. And, so there are nice parts of the city. And if you're young and you think you're going to live forever, and you want to take advantage of, the condo buildings and stuff, then, you don't mind living amongst the refuse and the.
I will say this, as much as I don't like hipsters, they really know how to do like a cool restaurant. Yeah. They have great beers. I have to give them that. Yeah. I will say this, the hipsters are not moving into the neighborhood I lived in, because on the block I grew up on. So I used to go back just to see the old house. And I once went in it because it was abandoned. And I put it on YouTube. And my family was just like, you can't do, what's wrong with you? Why would you even think to do that? But it's so bad. I would say 65-70% of the houses on my block they're either empty or they've been raised. They're just gone. There's nothing but grass anymore. The hipsters aren't moving there anytime soon, because I have a what's it called, a Google alert for Detroit's West Side, and I'd say 2 or 3 times a day, Detroit's West Side, a 4 infant shot, and drive by, something horrible. And but when the hipsters move to my old neighborhood, that's when I will be impressed with them.
But I'm guessing that your parents' auto workers, at one time, that neighborhood was like almost like a Levittown, a bunch of houses and a very middle class community, right?
It was, yes. When it went up in the 40s, that's exactly what it was. Small 2-bedroom houses, but very Levittown. That's a great way to put it. Mm-hmm. And then when I was born, it was I would say maybe blue collar, working class, the men drinking cans of beer, talking to each other on the sidewalk, probably wearing no shirt in the summer. But it was that's what it became. And then it just became worse and worse. And I've always said crime comes to a neighborhood before crime comes before poverty. Crime brings poverty. People always say, well, when you got poverty, you got crime. No, our neighborhood was what it was until the crime came, and then everyone moved out, and then the poverty moved in. Yeah, that's when it became, and then the businesses went out. And once the businesses on your main thoroughfare go out, then that's that. The neighborhood's dead. You can't. And where I lived, I could walk to we called them party stores. But this one had it's where you've actually, no, it wasn't a party store because they didn't sell booze. It was just sort of I guess it's a Detroit version of a bodega. Yeah. You know what I mean? Okay. So a candy store, maybe you'd call it. And I could walk to one without crossing the street. And that got robbed so many times it went away. And what was on the corner? If you walk 7 minutes right down to Joy Road, McMurder, the famous Detroit McMurder. It's so many people have been killed in that McDonald's that it's called the McMurder. So,
and it's still, is it still open?
After I left.
That McDonald's is
Yeah,
still open? Yeah.
still that came after I left. We didn't know the halcyon days of McMurder. We got out because we saw the McMurder coming.
Yeah. Do you know where Kid Rock grew up?
I believe he grew up not in Detroit, but nearby.
Uh-huh.
In I want to say to the northwest a bit, Orchard Lake area.
Yeah.
I think around there. And Eminem grew up in Warren, which is just north. It's so 8 Mile is the northern border of Detroit,
Uh-huh.
and on the other side of that is Warren. Then you go Sterling Heights, and you got Utica and whatnot. So he was from Warren, but I think he was within a couple of blocks of Detroit. So I mean, you got to give it to him, I guess. And I'm guessing most of the rapping he did in his early years would have been in Detroit. I doubt there's a rapping scene in Warren, Michigan, but so yeah, he's from there, and I think Kid Rock is from the north and west suburbs, I think.
Yeah. Okay. There's a couple of things that I wanted to ask about that we kind of went over. One was the libertarianism. You flirted with libertarianism because you like the idea of it. But let's talk about two things: this latest convention and the guy that they nominated, because he's the kind of guy who changed his social media profile to a mask wearing guy during COVID. He's also does the drag queen story hour. So he is the progressive side of libertarianism, and he was the one that they nominated. So have you been following that guy's nomination?
I have, and I think not that party ever had a chance, but this is the last kick in the throat. I think it's over. It's great news for Trump because your typical libertarian thinking person is not going to vote for that guy. You know who's going to vote for that guy? See, you know what I hate about libertarianism? It makes sense. You do what you want. I'll do what I want. I don't pay for you. Blah, blah, blah. And then you get some idiot that goes, and we don't need driver's licenses either. You're like, no, you just blew it. You just blew it. You do need a driver's license. I'm a sovereign citizen. Nope. Now the party's dying. So that guy, it's great news for Trump because now Trump's going to get a ton of libertarian votes. And another thing, RFK Jr. He just tweeted something. I've never seen so many lies. Trump didn't do anything for the workers of the nation. Well, actually, it was the lowest unemployment for every demographic. Trump, he didn't. No, he didn't lock us down. Trump locked us down. No, he let the states do it. And I do wish Trump had handled it a little differently. But Monday morning quarterbacking is always its own thing. But yeah, the libertarians. Sorry, not to get off on that subject. Libertarian Party I think it's dead. I think this is the last year.
Were you like me, like during COVID, you couldn't believe? Because I looked to certain people during COVID, when the thing started, conservatives immediately folded on the COVID stuff. They immediately caved and they bought into the hysteria. So I said, all right, I can't trust these conservatives. I'm going to go libertarian during this entire pandemic. They're going to pull me through. I went to reasonmagazine.com almost every morning, and they bought into the pandemic. I mean, I couldn't believe it. They were the most disappointing. The Libertarian Party showed me that they're a bunch of intellectual snobs because they are, libertarians. They have, we talked about the quote bear people with the graduate degrees. Libertarians are very intellectual. A lot of them went to, top colleges. They read Mises' writing and stuff in college. And then and this is not guys like Dave Smith, who I think is a real libertarian. Like that guy's real. And, do you know Dave?
Mm-mm. I mean, I know who he is, but I've never met him.
But I'm talking about the Reason Magazine intellectual people who they are more concerned about saying, I believe in science than I believe in liberty. And that's what they did for the whole pandemic was like, well, let's take a look at the studies. Let's wait for the facts, But I thought liberty was, no, we don't wait for the facts. We say liberty above everything, right? If you're a libertarian and you don't wait for the stupid study, right? You say, no, we have a right to not have an injection. We have a right to not swab our nose because we're free human beings.
Yes, absolutely. It was crushing defeat. You're right. I would say that was probably the first and first important jab in the heart of the Libertarian Party. And as if that wasn't bad enough, this guy they just nominated, that's cutting off the head of the party. I think that is over. And I think Trump's going to scoop up a bunch of votes. I think JFK Jr. is going to scoop up a bunch of liberal votes from Biden. I thought he was going to take from Trump at first, but if anyone's paying attention to him, there's nary a Trumper who will vote for that man now.
Yeah, and what do you think about where Trump has to navigate on this? Because he's been pretty crafty. Sometimes he gets booed at rallies when he talks about his precious vaccine. I thought Trump's instincts were good during COVID because he called on people like Dr. Atlas and other people like that. So he flirted with the hydroxychloroquine crowd. He had you could tell he had good instincts, and he has he had at least a stated desire to try to keep the country open. And, when he said we're going to open the country by Easter and all this other stuff, and they came down, but essentially he got rolled in such a big way. They crushed him. They rolled him. And I was very disappointed in Trump during COVID. And I continue to be disappointed in his nonsensical praising of his vaccine. And I think it has to do with his ego or whatever. What's your take on where he is now? Like, he's kind of painted himself in a corner because he wants to be Mr. like, oh, I did great during COVID with my stupid vaccine. But I don't know where he goes from here.
I watch a lot of his rallies. I think he's toned down the vaccine stuff. I think he's realized people are against it.
Yeah.
But he was touting that. And I mean, imagine standing in line for 8 hours to see Trump. You love him. And then he said, my vaccines are great. And people were booing him.
Yeah.
When you have those people who stood in line for 8 hours booing you, like that's the message right there. It's on the wall. It's not in a bottle. You can see it quite clearly. I think he's backing off on that. I think and I get it. I mean, if I were president and I didn't know what was going on, and I've got this guy named Fauci going, oh, well, here's what we should do. Now you're in a tough spot. If you don't do what he says and things go bad, well, that's on you. And I mean, looking back now that we know so much more about COVID and where it really came from and just how deadly it wasn't. Johns Hopkins University says the American survival rate was 98.9%. And that's not counting the people who got it and didn't go to the doctor. I got it. I didn't tell anyone. They were sending tests to our home, and I felt bad one day. Oh, I've got it. So I think the survival rate's probably it's definitely higher than that. It's probably 99.3, maybe 99.4. Who knows? But getting back, he handled it poorly. And what you just said opening this is he's crafty. He's very crafty. And I think by the time, I think two things are going to happen. A, people are so done with Biden, and B, he's going to stop talking about that. And they'll bring it up because they want to throw it in his face. And he'll say, well, I had Fauci, the number one expert in the world, telling me this, and what would you do?
Yeah.
And I think, and again, but like, I'm with you. That was poor handling. And I understand a lot of it fell to the states, and New York, obviously, Cuomo was ridiculous with it. But yeah, I think he'll survive that as they get, because I think things are going to get worse for the nation. I think there's going to be huge riots at the DNC convention. And I think people are starting to see, what's his name? Geez, I can never remember who's the scientist with the big hair, that's big gray hair, probably the biggest scientist in the history of the world.
Einstein.
I can never remember his name. Thank you. He wrote to his son, and I forget what year it was, but things were going badly. And Einstein wrote back. He goes, "It's bad, but the United States has this weird gyro, or what do you call it? Where just when you think it's going off one edge, it steers itself and goes the other way." He goes, "Don't worry, the United States will be okay." And that gives me hope. But man, are we close to the edge now on the left side?
Yeah, it's true. And I like when it's fun because you're in radio, but I think it's funny when you are doing radio and you're always trying to like act like you know what you're talking about, and then you just space on something like Einstein's name, and then you're like, oh, well, my viewers, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to show my trust of my viewers. And I just say, I asked them who was that guy with the hair, the famous sign.
Yeah. Who was that first president? The first president of the United States. He's on the dollar bill. I can't. Anyway, I always fold on the name Einstein because I keep wanting to say Heisenberg, and I don't know why.
Okay, before I let you go, I want to kind of go over this story that you wrote because it's probably one of the most fascinating things that I do not understand, and I'm going to put it up here on the screen. And this is the your last dispatch under tinfoil hatter day. This special ops guy who shot some illegals on his property or something. I don't understand what happened. Maybe you can tell me, but I'm fascinated by this story. I'm putting it up on the screen. Why don't you tell me what happened here?
All right, thank you. There we go. So here's what happened. May 3rd, a special ops colonel saw two guys on his lawn.
Mm-hmm.
Not his lawn, on his property. He's got a big chunk of property. And one of them had a big camera and was photographing his children. So we went out there to confront the guy. The guy got aggressive. The colonel shot him 3 times, and he's dead. But his wife called the cops or someone called the cops at 8:15. That's about to become important. So said, yeah, there's a guy. He's aggressive. Oh no, I'm sorry, p.m.
8:15 p.m.
It's about to become important. So what happens is the colonel shoots the guy, and the cops swarm, and they find another guy, and he's in a van. Now they say, the guy says, "Well, we're with subcontractors for a company called Utilities One, but they're not wearing the uniform, they're not driving the truck, they don't have tools, and they don't have utilities ID. The only ID the dead guy has is an international ID, and that's in the van. So there's no reason to believe that these guys are actual utility workers." Now, 8:15 is important because they said, well, we were taking pictures of the lines and whatnot. Well, 8:15 was 10 minutes after sunset in Carthage. This is in Carthage, right outside Fort Liberty or Fort Bragg. Used to be Fort Bragg, but apparently Confederates are bad 150 years later or whatever, 160. So they interviewed the other one and they let him go. They're both Chechens. They're here illegally. Chechens, is that what you say? And they're here illegally.
Yep.
And so they go to the company that they're working for, and the company refuses to answer any questions. And the company was purchased by a guy from Moldova who moved here in 2013 he started working as a dishwasher, and then he sold ice in Alaska, and in 3 years somehow managed to come up with enough money to buy this Utilities One.
Wait, he sold ice in Alaska? Did he sell sunshine in Florida?
I couldn't believe when I read that. Like, that's a good salesman. If you can sell ice in Alaska, maybe he did make a bunch of money. Now, here's what we throw in. Also, on the same day at the Quantico base. Now, remember this thing in Carthage I just told you about, a couple miles out of Fort Bragg.
Yeah.
At Quantico, two Jordanians here illegally try to blow past the guards and get onto the base. And they're both caught. Now, for what it's worth, Jordan, Chechnya, both mostly Islamic nations. And so that's the religion there. Now, turns out this colonel who shot the guy, he put his own cameras up because he had seen them 3 or 4 times before on his property. Mm-hmm. He had never gotten a notice, as utility companies do, saying, hey, we're going to be looking at the wires, blah, blah, blah. None of that at all. Now, go back 18 months earlier, some knucklehead shot up 2 electrical substations in Carthage. And the cops said, well, it's the same gun for sure. And it's someone who does know about substations because he shot it in the exact right spot to knock power out for the 40,000 people. We don't know if that's relevant or not. Now, add this to it. Special ops officers around the nation have said there's weird people taking photographs of my children, and I'm not happy with this. So this has been going on for about a year and a half, taking pictures of special ops families and children. Mm-hmm. Now, why would someone be photographing the children of special ops officers? Something tells me, and this is why I did this on Saturday, tinfoil hatter day, because this is, just sort of theorizing here. someone must be looking to scoop up the children of our special ops forces, which would probably be one of the number one. I mean, the Rangers, Army Rangers, of course, but you're going after these people who are warriors, right? These aren't the people who join for 4 years and study gender theory instead of throwing grenades. These are people who are very dangerous to our enemies. I don't know why this has happened, but the whole, from what I understand, the whole special ops forces nationwide are on high alert. They're all on high alert now and have been for a while.
And
so
are we, let me ask, the special ops, are these special ops guys who are currently in the under the purview of the U.S. military, or are they people like in the Eric Prince world who are kind of former special ops who are working in private security now?
Nope, these are actual special ops soldiers in the military right now. Yeah. And north of Fort Bragg or Fort Liberty, where this colonel lives, they're not giving away his name, the whole neighborhood is special ops officers. Special ops officers, and they're a couple miles outside of Fort Liberty. So, and of course, Christopher Wray from the FBI has been saying, wow, we're getting a lot of chatter about attacks. We're getting a lot of chatter about attacks on our infrastructure. Now, I'll throw this in. There have been cyber attacks on 3, they're smaller towns, but on the waterworks of 3 smaller towns where they're trying to disrupt the water. So there's more cyber attacks and on that infrastructure. So we see 3 attacks on various towns going after their water. We've seen the substation get shot out here. And here's the fun part. None of this really made the mainstream media when it happened. Now, if you've got an illegal immigrant getting shot by an officer, how does MSNBC not jump on that? Well, maybe maybe they're told not to. Maybe there's a little Project Mockingbird there too. Nah, don't write about that.
Yeah.
And the 2 Jordanians, that wasn't big news. It leaked out. Some small time. I wish I knew the Potomac Times. It has the word Potomac in it. Some small little news outlet released it, and suddenly some people are talking about it. Some people still aren't.
Well, there was and you included the link to the Fox. Fox did a kind of a headline version of the story. So Fox did address it, but they didn't go into the detail that you went into. They just kind of said this happened. And I would think, even without all that extra detail and what you're talking about with the special ops people feeling that they've been surveilled, is that 2 illegal Chechens were in a van without any, identification or tools. One of them was shot by the special ops guy, and the other one was released, right?
I was shocked that they released him. He's here illegally. There was just a shooting, and the FBI questioned him and released him, which is shocking to me. And you know what? Kudos to Fox. I will say this. This was kept somehow under wraps until, remember, this happened May 3rd, and we didn't get the details until, I think Friday night. On, of course, a holiday. Fox jumped on it. That's great. I don't know how much CNN is writing about this. It's still not big news, and it should be huge news. And the same thing with those 2 Jordanians. That didn't get picked up. Here's another story I wrote. There are at least 2, sometimes 3 attempts per week of foreign nationals trying to get on our military bases. 2 to 3 times a week. How is that not huge news?
Yeah. I mean, that's another story you have up on PJ Media?
Yeah, I wrote that one about a week before. It's called Want Spies With That? How foreign nationals are posing as Amazon drivers to get onto our military bases.
It's unbelievable. So I'm going to put that, for people who are more interested in this, they should stay on it. They can bookmark your site at PJ Media and follow you on social media. But I want them to follow this story because you seem to be the guy that's on it. I don't know if Alex Jones has talked about this, but this is obviously right up the Alex Jones alley. So hopefully this story will get more coverage. But I'll post about it, and I'm going to certainly be following it.
Oh, thank you, sir. Yeah, I'm all over this, and I've got people who send me things. Hey, what about this? What about that? You know what? Here's something else. If this guy, he's from he's Chechen. So would he really serve? He wouldn't serve in the Russian army, I don't think, would he?
No.
I don't think he would. Because someone was asking me, if there's a war, why would he get there? But I thought about that, but there's no reason he would be in that war. The Soviet Union is gone, and yeah, he wouldn't be there. He would if this were, but they did find 2 Russian-speaking phones in the van.
I mean, it's really
So
it's like there you can. There's no question there's something fishy, but there's like the possibilities are endless. There's like 8 different things that come to my mind that this could be.
yeah,
But to tell you the truth, the one that I would always go back to is that somebody within our own, the U.S. government is running this operation. That's why guys get released. Guys don't get released when the Russians have infiltrated us through, secret spying operations. Guys get released when they are employees of the U.S. government.
yes, yeah, absolutely. And I just read the FBI was chasing some Iranians back when Obama was in charge, and they caught them. And Obama said, "Well, we're working on this deal, so you got to let them go." He said, "Well, we think they're terrorists." Yeah, you got to let them go. Now, the fact that they didn't even take this guy down to the office tells me, and the fact that Biden leaves the southern border open so that they can come through. I smell a stink badger in the perfume aisle, Tom. That's what I smell. This reeks.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, it's like these are the kind of things that I just happened to hit upon this story this morning because I was looking. I said, I better check out Kevin's feed, see if he's commented on anything lately that we can talk about. But I mean, I just went in there and immediately I went down the rabbit hole. And so, it's incredible. But let's keep following it. And thanks for joining us on here, and let's keep in touch.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. Good to talk to you, Tom.
All right, Kevin Downey Jr. Talk to you soon.
All right, man.